There was an old house at the end of the road, considered abandoned for decades. People avoided it because of rumors about strange events happening there. A brave girl named Sarah decided to explore this mysterious house. Sarah entered the house at dusk, feeling nervous with every step. Things were quiet at first, but then she heard strange noises coming from upstairs. I decided to follow the sound, and when I got upstairs, I found a mysterious room. I slowly opened the door and discovered a room full of old dolls. The dolls seemed to be watching her with their blank eyes. When Sarah looked in the mirror, she saw a strange face appear behind her. Sarah was shocked and tried to escape, but the doors suddenly closed in front of her. The dolls began to slowly move towards her, and the sound of evil laughter filled the room. Sarah tried with all her might to open the doors, but she failed. In a moment of extreme terror, the dolls went to Sarah, and they all disappeared as soon as she touched them. She finds herself trapped in this cursed house where she continues to search for a way out, amid the shadows of horror that surround her. In that dark moment, Sarah began to hear strange noises and screaming around her. The dolls appeared and disappeared terrifyingly, leaving trails of darkness behind them. The more Sarah tried to move, the louder and more threatening they became. Suddenly, the lights went out and the place turned into complete darkness. Sarah was moving in the darkness, her anxiety accelerating with every step. She began to feel cold touches on her shoulder and whispered screams accompanying her. The sound of strange things moving around her, but she can't see where it's coming from. Suddenly, an image of a little girl smiling strangely appeared. She was holding an old doll in her hand, and her eyes were shining in the dark. Sarah felt terror creeping into her heart, as she realized that this place held supernatural powers. Sarah tried to escape again, but the darkness was almost suffocating her. A lone candle burned out in the corner, revealing the faces of terrifying dolls surrounding it. The dolls shrank as if watching them evasively. Suddenly, the dolls rushed towards her, their screams mixing with their terrifying screams. Sarah tried to scream, but no sound came out of her mouth. The dolls were getting closer and closer, and the further they went, the darker it got until they couldn't see anything. In a moment of depression, Sarah woke up in her bed, and the dolls of the old house were gone. She was breathing happily, but soon she felt something strange on her shoulder. She turned around in horror and found a small doll smiling next to her, its eyes shining with the same sparkle she had seen in her nightmare. While Sarah was trying to understand what happened, the doll began to move slowly. The bright eyes stared at Sarah terrifyingly, as if silently interrogating her. Sarah tried to move backwards, but found herself unable to move. Suddenly, the doll started laughing in a frightening voice, as if she was enjoying the sight of Sarah's horror. Even though she was a small doll, her laughter filled the entire room. The room began to fade and change, until Sarah was in a dark environment again. The dolls appeared around her and started moving towards her, but this time there were no doors closing. The dolls rebelled around Sarah, as if she was manipulating her like little dolls in her hands. Sarah tried to scream, but no sound came out. At the last moment, the dolls collapsed to the ground and disappeared. She found herself back in her room, and the little doll had returned to its original place. I felt a strong desire to make sure that all this was nothing but a nightmare. She was terrified, but she began to think whether these dolls were an attempt to transport her to another world, or whether they were just a nightmare fantasy. But despite all the thinking, doubts continued to haunt her, as if there was something incomprehensible lurking in the dark corners of her darkness. While Sarah was trying to regain her composure, she heard a strange noise coming from her closet. I opened the door carefully and discovered that the small doll had turned into a large and terrifying doll. The doll spoke in a low voice, threats and strange words filling the room. Sarah quickly closed the door, but the sound did not stop. She felt that something dangerous was waiting for her inside the room. I decided to get rid of the doll, so I took steady steps towards it. When she opened the door again, she found the doll sitting on the bed, and all the objects in the room were moving mysteriously. Sarah tried to speak bravely and asked the doll to leave her, but the doll raised her head arrogantly and laughed in a terrifying way. The lights in the room began to shrink and glow red, and the doll slowly moved towards her. The little doll looked back and smiled greedily. Sarah tried to escape, but all the doors were closed. She took the doll in her hands and held it tightly. Sarah felt a strange force pulling her into the doll, and in an instant she disappeared from reality. When she woke up, she found herself back in her room, but this time the big doll was there in front of her, and she was smiling evilly. Sarah knew she had entered another world, where the doll controlled everything. There was no way to escape, and she became part of the doll's world, living in a constant nightmare surrounded by dark and terrifying spirits. The more Sarah tried to escape or rebel, the more the doll grew larger and more terrifying. She watched her with sleepless eyes, as the objects around her transformed into strange and frightening shapes. The puppet had complete control over time and space in this cursed world. Sarah began to lose hope, as she was living in this never-ending nightmare. Every day she lived under the doll's control, and every attempt at rebellion brought her greater torment. One night, while Sarah was sitting alone in the darkness of her room, dark shadows appeared before her. This time it wasn't the doll's shadows, but rather strange and evil beings. She had a chance to survive, but the price was high. The dark beings asked Sarah to make a decision: either remain in the doll's world and live under its terrible control, or accept the consequences and face the dangerous challenge. Despite her fears, Sarah decided to face the challenge and fight for her freedom. The dark beings began to shapeshift and gain incredible power. Together, they charged toward the large doll with tremendous force. A fierce battle erupted in this mysterious world, where the two supernatural forces collided. After a long and arduous battle, the dark beings succeeded in defeating the big doll. Sarah felt freedom flowing into her, but this freedom came with a heavy price. It is no longer the doll that controls the world, but dark beings have taken its place, and a new threat has begun in this other world. Sarah realizes that her freedom comes at a price, and that dark beings have plans to use her in this other reality. The beings grant her incredible strength and abilities, but at the same time demand her loyalty and join their fight against the darkness that threatens this world. Sarah decides to take on this new challenge, and with every step she takes, she discovers new abilities growing within her. She was learning how to use darkness to her advantage, and how to fight evil with means that transcended the concept of good and evil. On her journey, she encounters strange characters and fantastical beings, all with complex stories and unique challenges. In the midst of this twisted world, Sarah gained the qualities of a leader and a warrior, and began to play a vital role in protecting this world from evil forces. Thus, Sarah became a shatterer of restrictions, trying to understand the secrets of this mysterious world and live in it between light and darkness, where power and destiny appear in every corner and at every moment. Sarah continued on her journey, and as she progressed, her strength and understanding of darkness and light increased. You acquired new skills and interacted with strange creatures that inhabit this world. She learned how to use those powers to protect what was left of the light and confront the threats that threatened to engulf everything in endless darkness. Amidst its challenges, there were moments of incredible beauty in this dark world. Flowers were blooming in strange colors, and rivers of light were flowing in unimaginable places. There was a fragile balance between good and evil, and Sarah became the cornerstone that protected this balance. Sarah dealt with great challenges, but she realized that her true strength came from within. Her heart was beating with the will and determination to confront any form of injustice. The more difficult the battle, the greater her inner strength. One day, Sarah challenged the main forces of darkness, and the battle was fierce and epic. She used all her skills and learnings during her journey to confront evil with full force. After a long battle, you succeeded in defeating the dark forces and restoring balance in this dark world. When the storms calmed and light and darkness settled, Sarah became a bearer of hope and motivation for all beings who inhabit this world. She became a leader who directed her sight toward a bright future, a protector of those forces that promote good and resist evil. Thus, Sarah became a legend in this dark world, telling a story of strength, challenge, and success.